What's up guys? Welcome back to another video. This video is going to be a real pivotal moment for the Z, and that's because we're prepping this thing for roll cage. If you've been following along for a while and you watched the series on Drift Week, you know at the very end of Drift Week I stopped at Cage Kits, met those guys, hung out with them, and ended up buying a cage for this thing, and really haven't talked about it since. But now's the time. This thing is going to take a huge step from street car to race car and get caged. But there's a lot of work that goes into that before we even get to the point of putting a cage in this thing, and that's all the prep work that you have to do to get your car ready. Now, if you're paying someone a ton of money, you can probably just drop off your car with full interior, all the glass, all the seats, everything, and say, here you go, cage this thing. I don't have that kind of money. My buddy who's helping me install the cage doesn't have that kind of time, so I thought I would share the process of prepping a car to get caged before we actually bring it over there to actually get caged. So we're gonna dive in, we're gonna strip this thing out, prep the chassis, and get it totally ready. That way when I bring it over to my buddy Matt's house, we're able to just get the cage in, fit it up, weld it, call it a day. So it's time to set the camera down and get to work. If this is your first time here, or you don't remember what the inside of the Z looks like, pretty much full interior, at least on the front half. So we're gonna take these seats out, the carpet out. I'm gonna loosen up the dash. I may not pull it all the way out just yet. Center console, the back of the car. Back here is already gutted. Still have a little bit of sound deadening back here, but that won't really interfere with the cage. The main thing with 350Zs is all of this sheet metal. We'll talk about that a little bit more after I get all the plastics out, but there is a ton of sheet metal in these cars that has to get cut out. You have to grind out the spot welds, however you want to do it. All of that has to come out before you cage these things, and that's going to be the biggest ordeal here. The carpet, the interior, that kind of stuff, it's all going to come out real quick, but that sheet metal is going to take a while. So grab a snack, get comfortable, because we are jumping into this thing head first. But we're going to start with the easy stuff, so let's get these seats out. All right, with the seats out, the next big goal is going to be getting the carpet out, but before we do that, we've got to get everything that sits on top of the carpet out. So we're going to start with the center console. We're going to start with the center console here because that rests on top of the carpet. I'm going to start pulling all these plastics out because I believe the carpet kind of tucks up under those. And then these door sills will have to come out too. Now my center console has been cut up before because of the hydro and some other stuff I've done in here, but this lifts up out. I think I have a zip tie on that side, but it lifts up out of the way. And then the center console itself is held in with two screws going this way. There's a screw here. Never mind that. And there's a screw, I think under here or in here. Mine have all been removed, but there's a couple of things like going down this way that you'll have to remove, and then the whole center console should lift up and out. Get that out of the way. All right, so we got the center console out, the door sills on the side out, that back plastic panel out, and now we can get a better idea of what it's gonna take to get the carpet out. Now, obviously, if you're doing this on a different car, not a Z, this isn't going to be exactly the same, but for the most part, all these principles stand true. Like in this case here, getting the carpet out, the obvious first step is getting everything off the carpet out first, and now, like I said, we can get a good idea of what holds this carpet in. So you can see with the door sills out, the carpet just rests around these little guys. So like, pretty much just lift it up and over that. Now that's out of the way. We'll do the same along that way. On the back here, there are these little push pins. So we'll have to unclip those. You can see there's another one hiding back here. And then under the center console, this is something you would just cut, right? Because yeah, you could lift it up and over this and like fish it out, but give it a little snip. That'll pull out way easier. I've already cut this whole piece out because if you remember, this car was originally automatic. And then we'll have to see what lies under there. That's kind of the mystery section there, which we'll end up pulling this panel out and then getting a better idea of how that's all held in up there. But to make things easy, we're gonna start in the back, getting all this out, and then just kind of rolling the carpet forward until we are up under the dash, and we'll figure that out from there. Quick tool tip for stuff like this. If you don't have one of these tools, call it a panel popper, get yourself one. It is so handy doing interior work like this. I'll put a link to one down below if you need one. All right, we got the back side of the carpet all loose. kind of gross. I just cut it down the middle, and now we just have to focus on the front. So we're gonna remove the kick panel here, gonna remove this, like whatever you wanna call that panel there, and then we should have good access to the carpet way up front. A lot of times the carpet will wrap up and over the tunnel. I know in S chassis they do, and you have to like cut it down the middle and just pull it out this way. So maybe this is the same. Let's get in there and find out. I also forgot to mention I did unbolt the bottom of the seat belts here. Obviously that's interfering with where the carpet would be, so unbolt that, get it up out of the way, and we're good to go. All right, so we're up under the dash here. Pulled this kick panel out. There are these two plastic little screw-on guys. Just thread onto these, unscrew those, and then the carpet actually doesn't wrap up and over, which I'm thankful for. So it looks like we've got this vent that holds this part of the carpet in. Just yank that off, and then this part of the carpet should lift out. All right, let's get this out of here. Sick. The carpet out on both sides. Everything looks good. The hardest part I've ran into so far is this insulation here. You can see it's loose down on the bottom, but it actually goes up and under the dash like this way. And it is really difficult to get out. On the driver's side, let's jump over there. I started pulling some of it out. You can see the behind the pedals is clear, but it ripped right along there. And it actually goes up over the trans tunnel and then like way up behind. So I'm thinking I'm just gonna cut it, leave what's back there, at least until I pull out the dash, which we'll have to do for the cage, but I'm not gonna do that right now. So just trying to get as much out as I can so we can move on to the next step here. All right, got most of that insulation out. I still have to get all the sound deadening off the floor, but we'll work on that in a little bit and I'll show you how I'm gonna do that. For now, I'm gonna turn my attention to the sheet metal back here, and honestly, this is gonna be the hardest part of this whole job. And I don't just mean this strut tower, it is everything back there that's gonna be the difficult part. If we look at it from the front, you can get a better idea of what I'm talking about. So all of this comes out, all of that comes out. So I'm gonna start by pulling the plastics out here, pulling all of that plastic out, and then we will see what we have to do. Now, like I said, that sheet metal is going to be the hardest part. If you had an S chassis, an E chassis, almost any other car except the Z, we're just about done, right? I would throw some dry ice on the ground, get the sound deadening up, which I'm going to do a bit later. I'll go into detail then. But after that, you can clean some areas where you think the base plates are going to be, remove any wiring, which I'll have to do later. And then your car would pretty much be ready to cage. Maybe you could pull the windshield out if you want. I might remove my hatch, but it's not a ton of work. It's just getting everything up out of the way, cleaning the metal that the cage and base plates are going to weld to, and then you're pretty much done. But not on a Z. Nissan went full overkill on this thing, and I think that's why these cars are so strong and they do so well without a cage. If you've driven a Z, if you've tandem in a Z, if you've crashed a Z, you know they're pretty strong, and this is definitely why. So I got the speakers out, seat belts out. Well, not that speaker, but you can see this huge just thing that connects the two sides of the car plus the strut tower back there. So this car is solid from the factory, and this is going to be really fun to remove. It's held in by 1,000,000 bolts, 12 mils. There's 10 mils hiding in the corners, and then 1,000,001 spot welds. It's all spot welded along there, spot welded along the sides. It's gonna come out in a series of drilling and grinding and bolts. And while I'm really excited to tackle this job and get it done and get this car caged, I think it's gonna be so awesome. It's really bumping this car up to the next level. This is not the part of the job that I'm looking forward to. I can't wait to get it done, but it's diving into it knowing that I'm gonna have to sit there and grind every single spot weld or drill every single one out. And it's just, I know it's gonna take a long time. I know it's gonna be a huge job. So nothing else to do but stop talking about it and get to work. I'm gonna start by removing all these bolts. There's a bunch of 12 mils here. There's some more in the back. And then there's a lot of little 10 mil bolts that are kind of hidden, like back up in there, back over there. So I'm gonna get as much of the bolts out that I can, and then we'll start identifying the spot welds that have to come out and start tackling that. One thing I mentioned was wiring. You want to get all your wiring unplugged, tucked way up out of the way, so when it comes time to get the cage in and start welding, you're not worrying about burning wires, messing stuff up. While you're in here with all this wiring accessible, it's a good idea to get rid of what you don't need. Obviously, this is not a requirement. You can just zip tie it up out of the way, forget about it. But since I'm in here, I'm gonna go ahead and start marking some things that I know I don't need. That way, when I get the time, I can actually cut it out of the harness and get rid of some extra wiring. As an example, this whole wiring harness is related to the power seats, the airbags, and the seat belt, like the little light that goes on whether your seat belt's on or off. So I don't need any of this. So what I'm gonna do is I've got some red electrical tape. I'm just gonna tape around it, set it off to the side. That way I know red means it does not need to be here. And when I have time, I'll cut it out of the harness. Like that, wrapped in red electrical tape. Now I know in a week from now or so, when I come back to messing with all this, I don't have to think about that. I know red means it's gotta go. Okay, so there are two, maybe three ways to tackle this job. When it comes to getting rid of spot welds, pulling panels apart, you can drill them out, which is not that difficult, but it typically leaves a mess, and it's really hard to drill through just one panel and not into the second and just leave holes all over your chassis. And then you can grind them out. Now you can use a grinder, you can use a flat disc, you can use anything like that. Again, that makes a really big mess. The most professional way, and what you'll see most body guys do who like replace quarter panels and stuff, is they'll use a thumb file or a grinder, whatever you want to call it. Let me just pull mine out real quick. All right, so this is a 1/2 inch belt sander. You can see the sandpaper on the little belt is pretty small. That's just the right size to get in on spot welds. Grind them down, and then you should be able to separate those panels. This is going to make the least amount of mess out of all the options, and it's going to keep that panel underneath there as clean as possible. This is a fairly affordable one I found on Amazon. I'll put the link down below if you guys are interested. All right, so we're on the passenger side of the car here. I'm going to start in this corner, work my way up, and try to get this part of the panel separated off of this part, which is what we're keeping down here. Safety glasses on, let's get to work. Okay, this is by no means a fast-paced job. There's no easy way through this. Whether you're using a drill or a grinder or the little belt sander like I have, it's gonna take a while. I've been here for maybe 10 minutes and I think I've only got 4 or 5 spot welds out, but they are coming out clean and I'm happy with that. This may not look clean because the metal's kind of mangled from me hitting it with a hammer and a chisel, but what's important is the metal underneath it. That's what's nice and clean. I'm not sanding, I'm not grinding way deep into the metal, I'm not drilling holes into the metal, I'm just sanding this enough to pop that off, and it's working pretty good. I did realize I have to take this metal thing off to get to a spot weld right here, and while this was held in with a bunch of bolts that I already removed, it's held in with 2 bolts that are from the underside of the car going that way, so that's annoying. I'm gonna get the car up on jack stands, get that out of the way, and then just continue on for the rest of my life. So this is absolutely working. The belt sander works. It does a great job at sanding down through that spot weld and not into the panel underneath it. You can separate them nice and clean, but it takes forever. And I don't have a crazy amount of time to get this done. My solution for that is I'm going to get a cutoff wheel, grinder, cut as much of the sheet metal out as I can, as close as I can to where those spot welds are, and then I'll go back later and clean it up with the belt sander and actually like get the panels separated. It's really hard to do when everything's all connected and I can barely move any of the panels because that one connects to this one, that connects to that one, that connects to that one, and it just goes on forever. So I'm gonna just get in here, start hacking stuff up, maybe with a Sawzall, maybe with a grinder, probably with both. That way I can get some more room, I can get eyes on just about everything and start tackling this one piece at a time. Because as I was digging into it and trying to do this one little corner, I realized, well, I can't lift that panel up because it's connected to the one underneath it. That's connected to the one to the side of it. And it's just this crazy puzzle of sheet metal pieces stacked on top of each other. And all of it's got to come out. So we're pulling out the big guns. We're going to make some real quick progress, and then I'll worry about cleaning it up afterwards. Okay, it's time to get serious. Also, Red Bull, send me a case of this yellow, because look at that color match. Please. Let's get to work. Got a little excited there. Whoops. This is going well. Even with the Sawzall, this is not an easy job. There's so many layers, and it's like a crazy puzzle that makes no sense at all. And I've just been cutting everything I could possibly see that connects different things, and it's still not enough. Man, I'm exhausted, and I really haven't even gotten this one piece out. I'm gonna keep working away. This is definitely a very in-depth job here, but we're gonna get it done. All right, this is where we're leaving off for today. Pick back up tomorrow. Just thought I'd give you guys a quick update. Got that whole piece out with the Sawzall. Now I have access to the spot welds like way in there. And took the hatch off to make the access a bit easier. You can see how much more room we have now. So still a lot of work to do. Like I said, all those spot welds and the strut bar, but we'll get there. We're back. It's the next day. It's time to jump back into this thing and get to work. Now I still have a lot of cutting, a lot of grinding, and a lot of finish work to do to get the rest of that sheet metal out. That is a big job. But I feel like I showed you guys enough. You understand what I'm trying to accomplish here. I'm not gonna bore you and make this video an hour long of me just grinding spot welds, because that would be really boring. So we're gonna turn our attention to the next step. Now this is one that would apply to you regardless of what car you're driving. Obviously, if you don't have a 350Z, you don't need to worry about all this stupid sheet metal. But we're gonna turn our attention to the sound deadening that is stuck to the floor. And this is probably one of the most fun parts of the job, at least I think it is. And let me show you why. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the sound deadening is this kind of like tar stuff that is stuck to the floor of the car. Some back there, a lot right there. We've got to get all of that out. Now the main reason is because it's going to be in the way of where the base plates for the cage are going to go. Now, yes, you could just get rid of like a little box right around where the base plate's going to be, but in my opinion that doesn't look clean, doesn't look nice, and I want this car to be nice. It's one of those things, I'm only going to cage it once. I might as well take the extra steps in the prep work and have it worth it. Plus, like I said, this part of the job's kind of fun. So all you're gonna need for this is dry ice. Go down to a grocery store and get you 1, maybe 2 blocks of dry ice, depending on what size car you're doing. Z is pretty small, but if you were doing maybe like a sedan or something, probably want a few blocks. Also, I already did the trunk. So if I had to do the trunk and the front, I would definitely want 2, maybe 3 blocks, because this stuff does get used up pretty quick. But anyways, you'll need a few bags of dry ice, you'll need a hammer, and a chisel helps. You don't need it, but it does help, a chisel or like some kind of scraper or something. Let's quit talking and get straight into it. All right, I've got gloves on. Dry ice can burn your skin, so make sure you're wearing some kind of gloves. Got my block of dry ice. Now, you'll want to break this block up, so I've got a pretty big hammer. Break it into smaller, more manageable pieces. The best way to do this is to focus on one area at a time. You can also see this isn't a lot of dry ice, so you're gonna just kind of focus on one corner and slowly move it around. And what it's doing is, because dry ice is so cold, it's actually freezing the adhesive that holds this sound deadening on. And you'll see in just a bit here, you can actually just lift it off the car in like big sheets. All right, as with most things on this particular project, it's all more difficult than it should be, but that's okay. We're making progress. I guess the only experience I have doing this has been in a couple of S chassis, and they're so old now that it doesn't take a lot of dry ice and it doesn't take a lot of force to get that sound deadening up. Not the same case with the Z. It's taking a lot of ice in a small area and just kind of working a little bit at a time, and I'm really having to attack it with the chisel and the hammer, and I'm getting there. It's just slow progress. So let me update you on where we're at. You can see I got most of it. That corner is really difficult because it gets a lot of heat from the engine and it's kind of like baked in over there. This is all cleared out. It's just a pile. So really this is what's important, because this is where the base plate for the cage is going to go, somewhere in there. So we wanted that spot nice and clean. Got this little back piece clean. Again, all of this was just loose. Same thing over there, and I'm just working on that last little corner on that side. And again, with this, all you're really doing is breaking up that dry ice into small manageable pieces, putting it in a spot, letting it sit, and you'll actually hear the sound deadening kind of crack, and that's the adhesive solidifying and kind of releasing the bond between the panel and the sound deadening. And that's the point that you want to get to, because that's where you can just kind of scrape it off with ease. Now, again, I didn't get there in all the spots. Some of it came up pretty easy and some of it didn't, but that's what you're trying to do. And then you just work your way through the whole car. Really simple. It doesn't leave a lot of residue behind, which is nice. Eventually, I'd like to clean this up and paint it, but I've still got a long ways to go. Again, I just kind of wanted to show you guys what that is, how it works, and how to do it. So hopefully you got something out of that. I'm gonna set the camera down, get back to work, because I have a million spot welds to grind. I have more stuff to cut and more sound deadening to get out. I'll catch up with you guys in a few. Now, if you don't own a Z, like I said, your car's pretty much ready to go. You got your sound deadening out of the way, you pulled your wiring up out of the way, you got any sheet metal, whatever, out of the way, all the interiors out of the way. You will want to pull the dash. I haven't done that yet, but for the most part, your car is ready to go to the fabricators, get a cage put in. Or if you're doing it yourself, you're ready to start bending tubes and getting stuff mocked up. For my Z guys out there, I thought I would go into a little bit more depth on what it takes to get this sheet metal out, because it is a big job. So yesterday, I took a Sawzall to this thing, straight down that way, went across, cut that through the center, went across that way. I had to get some from the back and use like a grinding wheel to get way in the little spots. In that spot and in this spot, you can tell that's like really ugly, but the whole reason I cut that out with really no care in the world is so that I can now get access to all the spot welds. So let's get in the car and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Put you guys in widescreen. So on this side here, right, you can see where we just chopped this thing with a Sawzall. Now I can get in here and get these spot welds, which are this guy right here, that guy right up there, and it just kind of follows the panel all the way along. But like the ones in here and way in here, this would have been impossible to get to if I didn't just chop this thing. And like, yeah, I could get these ones out and all of that and like open this, and it's just way easier if you just haphazardly cut the whole thing out. And now I can take my time and really get to all the little spot welds along all of this and pull these things out a bit easier. So if you're doing this at home, that's my suggestion. Cut this thing with a Sawzall and a cutoff wheel and get as much of the metal out as you can, and then go back and take your time and grind out the spot welds and actually do the finishing work and make it look nice. It's definitely a two-step process if you do it that way, but it is way faster than doing just the spot welds and trying to figure out how all this stuff goes together, because it's a huge puzzle and there's sheet metal on top of sheet metal on top of sheet metal, and if you don't know the exact order that it goes in, you're just going to be spinning your wheels. So get in there, chop that thing up, then go back and grind all the spot welds, and you'll end up with the same nice clean finish. If all goes well, you'll get it done even faster. I'm still here working on this thing. It has been hours and hours of work, and I'm almost at the end. You can see we still have the strut tower brace bar thing in place. After looking at the cage kits diagram, you can actually leave that there. You can see that corner is pretty much totally gone. I got the spot welds all ground down and everything looks real good all the way across. I still have to do that little panel there, but that's really it. One last thing I wanted to show you guys, and that is how to prep the actual chassis for where you're going to weld on the base plates. Now, like I said, I kind of looked at the diagram of where the cage sits, how it looks, and I saw that there was base plates up against the strut tower bar, wheel well area on the back here. So I thought it would be a good time to show you guys the easiest way to prep the chassis to weld a base plate to. There's a couple different ways to do this, of course. The most obvious one is just to grab a grinder with a flap disc and just get in there, get after it. Now the problem with that, although it works well, is that you're taking material off the chassis. As you're grinding it with that flap disc, metal is coming off and you are making that metal thinner. And with a car like a Z or an old 240 or things like that, the sheet metal is already pretty thin. So you grinding it down isn't helping you any bit. So what we're gonna do is grab a torch and one of these little wire wheel things that attach to a drill. You could also use the one that's attached to a grinder. I just feel like this one's easier, it's smaller. It's better to get in tight spots like what we're about to do right here. So like I said, after checking out the Cage Kits website, I saw that the base plate goes in this corner here and kind of comes up on this strut tower here. So we need to prep about down to here and up to here. So you can see I already scraped off the sound deadening that was on this wheel well, but that's still not good enough to weld to, and neither is this factory paint. So we're gonna grab our torch and we're just going to heat up this whole area. There's really no right or wrong way to do this. Obviously, if you see the paint start to bubble, that's a little too much heat. You don't need to do that, but you're really not gonna hurt anything. Just don't burn a hole in the car. Once you've torched this area real good, we're just gonna get our little wire wheel on our drill and go to work. And in just a few short minutes, I've got a real clean, real nice area to weld to. That's gonna work great. We just have to do that to the rest of the corners now. All right guys, I'm gonna wrap this video up here. Obviously, I still have work to do, but I think I covered the basis of what actually needs to be done to prep a car for a cage. To do a little recap, step one is the obvious one, and that is gutting your interior. You've got to get everything out of the way of where that cage might go. Now, I haven't taken my dash out yet, but that is gonna be the next thing to go. You'll also have to take out your dash bar if the car has one, and a lot of times you're gonna have to take out the climate control, so the heating, the air conditioning, and that stuff. A lot of it can go back in, but the more room you make, the easier it's gonna be on you or your fabricator. Once you get all your interior out of the way, the next thing you've gotta move is your wiring. Now, like I showed you guys earlier, I started labeling wires with red tape that I'm gonna get rid of. You don't have to do that if you're cool with your chassis harness the way it is, or maybe it was already gone through and slimmed up, then just get it as far out of the way as possible. And the reason we're doing that is just for safety. We don't want any of these wires to get burned through as someone's welding that cage in. You got your interior gutted, your wiring out of the way. You can turn your attention to actually prepping the chassis, which means removing any sound deadening, insulation, all of that fun stuff. So you're gonna need the dry ice, the hammers, the chisel, a torch, one of those little wire wheels on a drill, and definitely gonna need some patience. Especially if you're doing this on a Z like I am, and you have to get all that sheet metal out of the way. Like I said, thankfully I looked at the Cage Kits thing and realized I don't have to cut that rear strut tower bar out. Now, I don't really like it, and after the cage is in, I may end up removing it afterwards, but I figured I'd rather play it safe, leave it in there, get the cage in. That way I can cut whatever I don't need, and I don't cut too much. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Hopefully I covered everything. If you guys have any questions, you think I missed something, drop it down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Make sure you're subscribed because this thing is getting caged either in the next episode or maybe the one right after that. Depends on how much work I get done. But that's going to be a huge step for this car, and it's really going to move it into the next category. And I am really hoping to get into some competitive drifting. I've had a ton of fun. I've got a ton of seat time, and it's time to go up to the next level and drive with the best people I can find. Anyways, guys, I'm going to wrap this video up. Like I said, drop a comment down below. Give this video a thumbs up if you are stoked to see this thing getting caged. And of course, catch you in the next one. Okay, couldn't end it like that. I had to give you some B-roll of the finished product. Well, mostly finished.